Hello and welcome to another comedian's interview for my blog and podcast, A Rich Comic Life. My name is Richard Gill and my blog describes my experiences of watching over 1,000 comedians and counting for almost 50 years. My guests today are the co-directors of the Hastings Comedy Festival, Chris Young and Jake Alexander. Yeah!
Good to see you. Good to see you.
Hello,
you,
Bo.
Richard. Hello.
How are you? You all right?
Yeah, not
good.
too bad for Monday.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. It's going to be an interview about your comic careers, lasting about 45 minutes to an hour. And the first question is, you are both co-founders of one of my favorite yearly comedy events, the Hastings Comedy Festival. What gave you the idea for a comedy fringe and how did the festival begin?
Firstly, Rich, thanks for saying that it's one of your favourite events of the year. We really appreciate that. It's always good to see you by the seaside and sharing comedy with us. So, how did the idea come about? So we have to go back to the summer of 2015.
Yeah.
I think at the time I'd been over to see Brighton Fringe in the June of 2015, and we saw a bunch of shows. I was doing, comedy at the time, fairly locally around the southeast. Been to a decent number of venues, and me and Jake were walking down the famous George Street in the Old Town that the cobbled historic street of George Street, and we were looking around and we were saying, oh, we could bring a festival to Hastings. We could do that. We could get that started, and that was the starting embers of where the Fringe was born. Was having a stroll down George Street, and was picking ideas up from other kind of events and festivals that we'd seen. And that was initially the spark of the idea. Was summer of 2015.
Yeah, and it was an idea. Like sometimes you talk with your friends about, oh yeah, that would be really cool if this happened, or maybe we should do that, and it never amounts to anything. You know what I mean?
Many of them.
Many of them, we all do. But in this case, we stuck with it. We've got a plan together. I know quite a lot of landlords in the Old Town, and we thought Hastings Old Town would be perfect because of the way that it's situated. Lots of venues quite close together. So I said to Chris, I was like, if I could set us up some meetings with some landlords, some venue owners, and then Chris tries to kind of recruit some comedians to be involved, then we'll try it and see where it leads to. And we kind of pitched an idea to people without having it much to back it up, really, apart from the idea. Lots of people put faith in us, as we did with lots of people as well in that first year. And it was, I suppose, it was exciting. Obviously, there's a level of anxiety kind of going into the unknown. But yeah, we spent probably, I don't know, mate, 9-10 months planning that first year. Chris, would you say?
Yeah, relentlessly to make sure. And we're both, I wouldn't say perfectionists, but it's not far off in terms of it has to, even down to the small detail had to be, we knew going into it that we just didn't want to have a room and a mic and then just allow people to turn up. We had to design it really from the ground up in presenting it so that it was a fun place to play fundamentally, but also it then allows it to be a fun place to then watch, and then the two go hand in hand. So those are the kind of the key core criteria that we wanted to do. And if we showed you the first program that we brought out and the program that you saw the summer of this year, like the difference, that the journey that it's come on, being its kind of 8th year next year, is it's astounding.
We've still got the program, haven't we? Before June this year, we got every program out, had like a timeline of everything, and that first year, but we pulled it off. It was interesting though, because we were like telling people, oh yeah, we've got this idea that we're going to do, like bring like a live comedy festival to Hastings. Some people just like, oh yeah, like kind of like question, really, like where's this come from? Because it was quite, at that time, obviously we're verified with it now, people know who we are and what we do, but that first few months people took a chance. Basically, they really did take a chance on us.
They were
it's
calling
so,
us
so
audacious young
good.
men.
It's so good because it's very similar with how my blog started. All I had was an enormous Excel spreadsheet of every single act I've ever seen since the 70s.
Right.
And I thought, who's going to want to look at this? But my friend in Carlisle, she runs her own business, and she said, this is crying out for a blog. And literally I said, what's a blog? And then a friend of mine said, if you've got a camera on your PC, you can do a podcast as well as a blog. And it just took off. And it's wonderful for a festival like Hastings, because you're in a beautiful setting, and to have the idea of that, you're obviously both massive comedy fans like me, and you just want to spread the word of positiveness and joy, because to actually go to a comedy show is extraordinary.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, that's a sweet thing to say, Richard. That is, and that is it. And we get a lot from that, facilitating that laughter for everyone every year, and facilitating a platform for the comedians to perform. So it's definitely rewarding.
Brilliant. Please tell me the process of setting up the Hastings Comedy Festival every year.
Okay. Shall I start, Chris?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, we've got a really good routine with it now. We're quite structured and disciplined with the planning, because we've got to be. Really, it's mainly me and Chris. We have a team around us that offer help and advice, especially over the week of the festival. We start, probably September, October, we start having conversations about it again, around kind of what worked, what we want to do differently next time. Then on Halloween, every year we open up our registration. So an open application for comedians to apply. We email quite a few agents as well to make them aware, which is good actually. Over the last few years, a lot of agents sending us acts to perform, which kind of shows well the trust in what we do. And then we just start reaching out to the venues again, kind of making them aware of the dates for the next year, start communicating that for our social medias as well. We normally put some social media posts out, save the date type thing. And Chris, you kind of also try and get sponsors involved, don't you?
Yeah, we meet every Monday. Once we launch that October 31st date, we're meeting every Monday, and from that we'll have a set agenda that we have to work towards, and we'll just write down some of the venues that are working with us, and we have to make sure, from the festival to run itself, is that there's enough kind of funds coming in to make sure that it's operational. So we have to make sure kind of operationally that the thing has to go ahead. And obviously we've been hit the last 2 years, with what's happened globally, and that affected events, worldwide, and we had to adjust to that. So the setting up process is we've tried to make it as streamlined as we can for the venues to be a part. It's streamlined for me and Jake to make sure that we can manage it, it's not overwhelming, and as streamlined as possible for acts to take part. Sometimes when you're applying to some other festivals, there's a lot of process to go through and a lot of things to submit. We make that as streamlined as possible, because acts are busy gigging. The last thing they need is to have any barriers in place. So the whole setup process is designed, from the ground up, really.
We aim on a good year. We aim to have pretty much every comedian booked by early spring, so we can put the listings on our website. But we start booking acts really kind of around Christmas time, because we've got enough to allocate. We're very kind of like I said, we're very structured with what we do, and nothing goes missed. A lot of it is, I think this year, Chris, is the first time I've created a spreadsheet for our normally it's in my notepad, so I've got notepads. I'm a big fan of lists.
Jake, do you remember the first year when it was just in my head, and you said to me, you need to get a notepad, because I had everything in my head and where everyone was playing in my head, and you were like, yeah, but I can't get access to that. So can you can you write it down, please? And I was like, oh, okay, but in my head I knew exactly where everyone was playing, but you were like, yeah, but it's not a shared drive, Chris.
So now it's a OneDrive in your head, ready to go. But it's so true about organising. You've having grown with it, you've got to be organised, and you've got to I suppose time manage, as you say. You start thinking about it September, October time. Yeah.
It comes around so quick, Richard. Every year we're like, no, we've got time, and all of a sudden, once Christmas is over and that New Year's done, it comes around really, because we have to go to print by March, so we have to make sure that our program's designed and that everything's up to date, so that if we miss those deadlines, it's there's no point having a festival when the programs aren't ready, so
that's a busy period, isn't it? Getting the program ready is probably the busiest period outside of the week that the festival's running, because we've got deadlines. We aim really, it depends when Easter falls, but try and get it like ready to distribute by Easter, which is normally 6-8 weeks before, something like that, 10 weeks. And we hit our targets every time. We're good with it. We are. We've got our own process. I think also, Rich, it's important to say we've got a model that doesn't rely on funding.
Right.
And that was quite important when we set it up, because we could, for a few years, get some art council funding, get some funding from the local authority, but we knew that was always be risky. So we didn't want to create a model that was reliant on that money. So the model that we got isn't, so we could do it year in, year out, no matter what's available to us.
That's fantastic. That's such a good idea. I mean, with all the organisation that you've got now, what difficulties or challenges have you had to face with in the past in setting up the festival? I can't imagine there are many difficulties, because it runs so smoothly when I come along.
I think when COVID hit, that was obviously a challenge. But I mean, that year we had the whole listings and festival planned and ready to go. I think we were just in the process of getting our program together during March when the lockdown was announced, and there was that glimmer of hope that the COVID might be over in 12 weeks. Do you remember that? and that was kind of like 12 weeks, 12 weeks into our opening night. And obviously, but everyone had to cancel everything that summer. But what we, to put a positive spin on it, we moved our festival to online quite quickly. And we had comedians send us live recordings of their set or their show that we were able to then stream on YouTube and Facebook. So we had a lockdown online festival, and I think we're probably one of the first festivals to do that.
And we managed to put that out there in like 4 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks to get that together. From the time of where we had to cancel, we were like, oh, we need to move things forward and get that online. And that was a challenge, wasn't it? That was it was a period. It was like, actually, we should probably try and do something here. And we did. We managed to pull that off. But that was challenging. But I suppose it was challenging for everyone at that time. I don't know, really. Obviously, there's some expectations, I suppose, sometimes, from acts or audience members that you've got to try and manage. Can be quite tricky. But I think we're quite good at that as well. I don't know, Chris. What would you say? Challenges? I was just thinking about it. It's a tough one because we're so adaptive. Whenever whenever we've had a challenge, whether it's environmental or whether it's something that's that's happened that's out of our control, we've always tried to manage it as best we can, and we've never ever said, oh, we're just going to cancel this. We've always come up with a solution as to how we can move forward. And I think the audience and then the people that come actually see that. And we're although we're directors, we're very much hands-on. You sat in an office allocating shows, and all of a sudden you don't see us. We're running auxiliary cables sometimes from venue to venue, or you'll see me holding a PA equipment and, you know, loading it, and when we're the first to turn up and we're the last to leave, you know, and sometimes that's a challenge in itself, making sure that, you know, we're, you know, I'm one side of town, Jake's the other, we're in constant discussions with each other and making sure that everything's a well-oiled machine. And sometimes when people turn up and they see the show and they leave, they don't really always understand the kind of the challenges that led just even to that day. You know, I remember when the first festival happened in 2016, it was the EU referendum. Opening night was EU referendum on the Wednesday, absolutely bucking it down with rain, and we were like,
train delays.
Train delays. There was waterlogged, and we were like, the first shows were like, oh, okay, this is quiet. As soon as the rain stopped, for those 8 o'clock, 8:45 shows, people came out, and we were like, oh yes, people came out. You know, so that was everyone had gone to vote. Everyone had gone to vote first, and then they came to the shows after us. So.
It was bizarre, but of course that was going to happen. But then obviously we had like you said, the added element of the horrific weather, the train issue as well. I suppose most, obviously there's challenges that we have to deal with each year, but I suppose that first year probably was the most challenging. But we had a lot of support with us, and the venues, like I said, we all got kind of going into the unknown, so it was a bit trial and error for that first year or two. So any challenges that we had, we learned from them and tried to ensure that they didn't happen again. You know, and normally it's pretty smooth, to be honest, like each year.
What is wonderful to see every time I've been there is that both of you are on the ground all the time. I've seen you at doors whilst I'm queuing up, about to go in, and making sure everybody's okay going into specific things. So that is well noted that you are both seen on the ground. It's not just here's a festival, go and enjoy it. You're actually there doing it. And the other thing I wanted to say was how good the online thing was for you, the online opportunity. When lockdown happened, I attended a lot of online comedy nights, and done well, they were a very good substitute. But when I first went along to them, there was no audio on them. So I was sitting here looking at four walls, laughing to myself, thought I was going to be taken away. But when the comedians, when the audio came on and the comedians could judge the laughs and chat to the audience, it was a very good substitute. But by God, you can't beat live. I'm so pleased everybody's back doing what they do, because the whole industry was decimated, of course, and now everybody's trying to come back. So thank you for all that you do. What do you think makes the Hastings Comedy Festival distinctive?
It's a tough one, because it might be for something that someone from outside looking in might be able to answer in terms of what makes it distinctive. We've always tried to get, you know, the branding right. We've always tried to create that real close together festival experience that you might get from, you know, other festivals, say for Edinburgh, for example, where you have that kind of stretch of venues string together. In the Old Town, because the festival started in the Old Town, where there was 5 or 6 venues that were very close together, and people would be seeing one show, they'd run to the next show, and we were sitting there and we were observing, like, you know, that's what we wanted to kind of emulate, was that kind of rush around, see one show, run to the other side of the street and pop in and see that. So whether that makes us distinctive, or I'm not really entirely sure, but that was something that we were quite critical on, making that experience, rather than having venues across town where you would see one and then you would have to get a bus to the other side of town. For us, it didn't make sense. It didn't feel like what we wanted to create as a festival if we were going to go down that route. So yeah,
I think also the fact that it's over 5 days, so Wednesday to and including Sunday, which makes it nice and compact. Like Chris just said, you know, it could be, I mean, the venues have spread out a bit more now, so in Hastings Old Town, the town centre, and St Leonard's, but the fact that you could go and see a show at 7:30 in one venue, then 2-minute walk to see an 8:45, and then maybe you could see three comedians in 3 different venues over 3-4 hours, and I think that's really good. And I think the audience and the community really appreciate that. And that's what we're setting up now in St Leonard's as well, a similar feel to the Old Town. So there'll be 4 venues, and probably 3 of them will be running shows at the same time. I think our kind of design and promotion stands out as well. Try and become really creative with our poster and our program front cover, and I'm really kind of like proud actually of what the designer and us put together each year. It's very standout. I think we kind of like have the ethos of it's our festival, so we can actually really do what we want. And I think that creativity comes across when it comes to our poster and program
Very
as
much
well.
so, yeah. I totally agree with you. I love the compactness of it. I'm very fortunate to go to the Edinburgh Fringe every year, and I take a week for my holidays, and loads of my friends come along. But I have to design this incredibly complicated spreadsheet. You have to be in the specific areas at one time and everything. And it's wonderful that, as you say, you can see 3 or 4 comedians in the space of a minute here and a minute there, depending on where you are in Hastings or St Leonard's. But certainly as well, I've got the 2021 program here, which is so distinctive. It really is. And the other thing as well I want to say is the location. It's wonderful to get out of London. I love living in London. I've been in London half my life. My home city is Carlisle. But I love to get away, and it's one of the nicest places to have it as well. And to have the 2 or 3 different areas is lovely.
Yeah, Hastings is a really cool town, to be fair. I mean, it's only 90,000 people live here, but it's got a good reputation. It's got a reputation for many reasons, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, especially in June, that's what we always thought, do it in June. But we have so many local festivals that happen here. And there's a festival actually called Fat Tuesday, which happens on every Shrove Tuesday on Pancake Day, a really cool music festival. And that's been around a few years before us, but very similar in the fact that it's bands and musicians moving around venues. So, yeah, I mean, but June in Hastings is a wonderful time to be down here. It really is, with the beach and just normally really nice warm weather.
Yeah.
The town loves the festival. I think there's someone did say there was like 45 festivals a year in Hastings, which is the most festivals per capita anywhere in Europe. So the most festivals for 90,000 people is in Hastings. How it works. So the town does get behind its events and have really kind of supported us. And most of why people attend our festivals is word of mouth.
Sure, yeah.
To come back each year.
Yeah. How do you approach the venues? Do you use the same venues every year, or do you look for new venues every year?
Yeah,
does it go about?
We look for new venues for sure, and we're always looking to add extra venues to what we've got. I suppose in total over the last 7-8 years or so, we probably worked with about 20 different venues, but we normally try and have about 12 or so each year. I mean, most of them have been with us since year 1, but then Hastings again, it has venues pop up and new places opening all the time, and we have an idea actually that could work, maybe and we just approach them, have a conversation around what we're doing. Are they interested? Generally they are, which is a good sign, and we kind of go and meet them in the space, try and work out if it'll work out the dates that they would like. That doesn't conflict too much with kind of their popular nights or making money. I think it's good that over the years now we've managed to work with venues that are pretty much closed rooms.
Yeah.
That first year there was definitely a couple of venues where it was microphone and PA system in the corner. But yeah, we're happy with our venues, and generally they're very, very kind of accommodating and welcoming and happy for us to work with them.
And that's good, because you build up a team rapport with them every year. They'll know when it's going to happen and what's going to happen every year now. So you've created this bond between them all. It's great.
They know as well. If we come in like this time of the year into their venue, and they'll be like, "Oh, it's that time of year again."
Here they are again.
Yeah.
It's happening again.
And I'm pretty sure half of our equipment is scattered over venues still.
We've got so much. Yes. But,
the nice thing I noticed as well was because the weather's better down in Hastings, there's a lot of outdoor venues as well, which is lovely. You hold shows outdoors a lot as well. Which is good.
Yeah, we've actually got an outdoor venue that I don't think you've seen.
Right.
We had it up until 2019. Yeah, we called it the Comedy Shack.
Nice.
And in George Street, in the open space in George Street, Butler's Gap, we've knocked up a makeshift venue. But it's legendary, and it kind of like, yeah, we have comedians perform throughout the 5 days. Sometimes some musicians perform up until, Friday, Saturday night, sometimes up until 12, 1 o'clock in the morning. So hopefully we can do that or something similar next year. But the Jenny Lind Garden's always cool, isn't it, Chris?
Yeah, I was just thinking, Jenny Lind Gardens is a really good space. We had 2019 as well was the last time that we did the secret garden party, Rich. What we did, we had a house in the old town that wasn't too far from one of the venues, and she had a lovely garden, like a little courtyard. And so what we did, we would have acts that were coming down that were doing shows, like maybe 6 to 8 acts on a compare, and we'd have them in the garden. And then I put a post out to say the first 60 people to get to this part of, outside this venue, this part of town gets in. We're leading up to it, we're teasing where it might be. So we'd say outside, the first 60 that turned up, we have a staff member or volunteer that would, walk them round to the venue, and then we took the post down, and then everyone was like, "Oh, we missed it. Where is it? Where is it?" So we created this kind of demand, and then we had a show in the garden, and we've had some really good acts come through and do that, and they were like, "Do you know what? That was one of the most fun things I've done," because they get to plug their show as well. It's completely outdoors. And it has this kind of exclusivity about it, where when we walked back to see if anyone else there was about 40 people there that didn't get there in time. So because it was sold out. So
wow.
Yeah, and we can kind of do those things because we're not kind of bound by any kind of production company or any type of funding that we have to. It is just me and Jake coming up with ideas where what should we do, how should we do it, when should we do it, should we do it now? So it's fun. It's a fun process.
Right.
That's
so good. Such a good idea.
And the Jenny Lind Garden, we always had shows in the function room, which I think you went to a function room show, didn't you? And then last year, when we had to, it was still some COVID restriction rules,
right?
And it was table service and stuff like that. And it worked out it'd be very difficult to do it in their function room. We were sitting in their garden with the manager of the venue, and we just thought we could just do it here. And we kind of like looked around us and thought, I think that could work. And now, like, I'm really proud of them shows actually in the Jenny Lind Garden because it offers something different. It's a summer's evening or on a Saturday or a Sunday. We had Helen Rain, didn't we, perform, Chris, on the Saturday, and it was raining. So you got to prepare for some bad weather, but
biblically raining. He called me and said, "I'm going on tour," because Henning lives in St Helens, which is just, well, we class it as Hastings, but it's just the next kind of town along. And he called me and said, I'd like to do a show. And I was like, we've literally got like a 1:30 slot. And he was like, I'll take it. So he took it, sold out in about 8 minutes. And then he said, can I come back tonight? I was like, yeah, if you want. So we found him a slot about 9:30, and he came back, and that sold out again. And he came back, he started off with a show, obviously really kind of rough with the notes. And by the evening, it was completely polished. And I'd never seen it seen both versions of it turned around so quickly to go for, I think it was like an hour and a half the first show, and then he came back and tightened it right up, no notes. Obviously he's a true professional, but it was good to see that organicness of it, to go from, I've got some notes, can I work through some stuff, went away for 7 hours, came back and then just hit it hard. And I was like, wow,
it was impressive to see. I mean, even the first time, it was the first time that he actually performed it, wasn't it? So he done it twice in a day.
Yeah.
And that's the second show, like you said, it was just so tight. compared to the first draft, almost the first performance of it. It was great to see.
One of the nice things about the blog is that I've seen so many comedians start off and watch them develop over the years, but to see it within a day, that's extraordinary.
Yeah, it was, and it shows he's a professional, and that's what he does. Yeah,
brilliant. How do you decide which comedians or comedy acts perform at the festival? Is there a decision made, or?
So we have an open registration process, which we started again. That's always been our process. What we had last year was an overflow from 2020 acts that were cancelled. The 2021 festival had 3 venues that couldn't accompany shows because of the space and the distance between what tables needed to be from Public Health England and that kind of stuff. So we have to actually honour about 40 or 50 slots to acts that we had that needed to be followed on. So we contacted them directly and said, would you like to have the show? So we kind of reached out and curated it ourselves for last year. But this year it's just, straight open application process. You can download the application form from our website. Me and Jake go through them every Monday, and we try to create it, as fair as possible, so that it gives the best opportunity, to acts that are just starting out as well. That's kind of one of our core ethos, is that we created a festival, not for acts that kind of don't get a chance, but we will definitely go through and consider that. And some of our kind of, best kind of shows that we've seen over the last years have come from acts that have started out, very early on. And that's been very enjoyable for us, and makes me and Jake's kind of worthwhile having an application process.
Yeah, we have. I suppose there's always a core group of comedians that come back most years, but I think it's nice to be able to book acts that we haven't booked before. That's always good, seeing emerging comedians come through and perform in Hastings for the first time. But it's also nice that comedians come back each year and build up an audience in Hastings. So from one year to the next, their numbers in the audience might get bigger and bigger and bigger, which is really good to see. But it's quite a fun process, I suppose. We can't always allocate everyone. It's just not possible. And I think on our website, we're quite clear about that. We do have a finite amount of shows that we can book for. But I think this year we just, like Chris said, every Monday go through new applications. What agents have got back to us? Who are they looking to book? So it's quite a fun process.
Yeah, it sounds it. I love the fact as well that with my blog, it runs exactly the same sort of process. Really, it's not just for the well-established acts that I've seen, but it's also for the brand new comedians and watching their journey. I'm go to many free comedy nights, and I'm always the friend that they bring along because they know they're gonna get a laugh. Mind you, if they're not good, I just sit in silence. Never heckle. Anyway, can you tell me more about promoting? You touched on it before. There is a lot of word of mouth, and the program is fantastic. But do you promote through TV, PC, social media, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think social media is great because it's like digital flyering, and Chris is really good actually with the design. So we have a tile that we design for every act with their show information, a picture of them, the venue and stuff like that on it. And we make sure that's shared on our social media. So every comedian, it's fair, everyone gets that share. So that's a great way of doing it, I think. And then obviously alongside the programs, the online listings, local media as well, and regional media that we work with. What else, Chris? How else do we?
Whatever our budget really allows, Rich. In all honesty, we have a small budget for. If it wasn't really for kind of word of mouth, we wouldn't think anyone really outside of the southeast or Hastings in particular would really know it even happens. But it's people that if you have 12 venues and there's 3 shows a night, that first night everyone goes back to work the next morning and says, oh, and then that kind of snowballs effects, or leading up to it, we sent out thousands of programs, and they're all gone. All the retention value of a program, if we was to advertise in the paper, it would cost us a few £100. But once that paper's gone for the day, no one really remembers the poster in the newspaper. It's not saying we don't use that. We just try to utilize the most reach for the least amount of money. Obviously, word of mouth is the cheapest. Getting together a good program ahead of time, the retention value of that is weeks and weeks and weeks. We try to reach out as far as we can. Obviously, if you're going to try and reach out into London, you're going to spend hundreds, if not thousands, of pounds in doing that, and we really haven't got the budgets to do that. So we do the best we can. We think we do a good job of it. If we look back at the figures and the percentage of shows that are well attended, we're like, okay, we're doing something right to get bums on seats, because we couldn't. It's kind of like we don't allow. We try not to allow it to fail, and it seems such a cliche. Of course, you don't know, but we literally like, how do we do this so that we make sure that every show is a success? And that kind of draws back into what you were saying earlier about it. We're not just booking acts and booking. We want the venues to have a good time as well, so they come back. We want acts to have a good time, and we want the audience to be. When you're sitting in a comedy room and there's not many people in there, it's not always the best place to be. But once it's kind of getting towards full up, you're like, okay, everyone here feels kind of relaxed, and so yes, so our promotion is limited as reaching as far as we can get it.
Yeah, we've got to be smart with it, I suppose, and it's almost like a timeline, really. So that this time of year, people are starting to know the dates for next year, open up the application process, start talking to venues. So that is starting to get inside people's heads, some social media. January, February, on a good year, we could start adding names to our online listings, do a promotion about that, so people can start getting an idea of what comedians are booked. Then posters go out before the programs. The posters start popping up around town. Programs are released 8 to 10 weeks before, so it starts to get a buzz, people thinking and talking about it, and then by the time June hits, normally our numbers are pretty good. So there's always room for improvement, I think, with promotion, but Chris is right, it's what our budget enables us to do. But then you're in London, lots of comedians from all over the country. We actually do get people coming down from all different parts of the country, and we talk to them, we bump into them throughout the 5 days as well, and that's always great to see. That we're always surprised, and when someone's like, oh yeah, I come down from Derby for this, something like that, so it does get out there. There is a reach. There is a reach.
What I'm going to do, if you allow me, I will put the ticket link on my blog, and also this interview will go out 8 to 10 weeks before, so people are aware that it's coming up in 2023, and hopefully we'll get as many people there as we can.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Do you ever have a backup plan if an act cancels at the last minute?
Shall I answer that? We've been very fortunate. Our dropout rate for the festival is actually relatively low. I think it's mainly because it's a fun festival to play. It's so close to Edinburgh, and people really want to get the time in. If for whatever reason it's unfortunate enough that they can't make it down for whatever reason, then we've had it before where acts that have come down have gone, I'll just jump on and do that. We've had there's a comedian called Paul Merrick, you might know, we had an act that just didn't realise that they were down for that day. They thought it was the next day, so they had an audience, a room full of people, and Paul Merrick, absolute legend, was like, I'll get up and he's done an hour, and he entertained them, and they were like, that was really good. We've had it where someone is, last year someone wasn't able to make it down, and myself and 2 other comedians from Hull jumped on and done a split hour between us 3. So it's not often, but when it does, we're quite resourceful, and we're surrounded by acts that are doing shows. There's acts that come down to support their friends, and sometimes they'll say, "Is there a spot for me to jump on?" I'm like, "Oh, we're not really." So whenever it comes about, we're not too far away from a comic who wants to jump on. So
yeah, I think we were pretty good with it, aren't we? I mean, there's the odd occasion, and it did happen last year where it's just too late in the day. But then circumstances happen. We're managing and overseeing lots of people coming into the town to perform, and sometimes we just can't replace someone last minute. And normally the audience are quite kind of considerate of that and understanding. But yeah, I think definitely when it gets to the weekend shows, normally we've got people that are just happy to jump on, even if it's for half an hour. They give the audience something that have turned up. So yeah, we kind of got a plan. We kind of prepare in some ways that there might be some dropouts. We never expect everyone to turn up.
Yeah, we always
the reason why I asked the question is that exact thing happened last year when we were there. We were booked to see, I think it was Sasha Ellen, who I've since seen, who's a superb comic, and for some reason she couldn't make it. And it was that whole show because you had to walk onto the set, Chris, and do 15 minutes. And I'd never heard of Gary Jennison, the whole comic. And he come on and he did 15 minutes or however long he did. And he said, does anybody want to ask me any questions or say anything? And I put my hand up and I said, I eat 2 packets of crisps a day and I wonder why I'm still alive. And from that, he created just about 20 minutes of the most perfect. I could not stop laughing. And I shook his hand afterwards. I said, that was brilliant. He said, you've given me an idea for an hour-long show. But everybody was happy, I'm hoping he'll come on here because he'd be wonderful to chat to. But
we know Gary and Jed. We've actually
Jed
Salisbury. A few years ago, we was at an event at the Bill Murray, which was really great actually, and there was quite a lot of comedy festival and fringe organisers there, and we got to become quite good friends with Barry as well.
Yeah,
friends. Yeah, and we met Jed and Gary for the first time. And I don't know actually how did it develop, but we see him like 2 or 3 times a year now. I was just thinking of what was a follow up to that, but we went to
Leicester Comedy Festival, and I class Gary up there as one of the most naturally funny comics I've met, and he says when he comes to Hastings he's 20% more funnier because he feels like, because he's northern and he's from Hull, that he just thinks that and I don't disagree with him. I do think if I had a Hull accent I would probably be 20% more funnier. So he likes coming down here because his accent's more distinctive, and they love him down here, and we love him down here.
It's the same with Jed as well, isn't it? Same with Jed, with both of them. They're great. I mean, Jed has his own solo show, but they also have a kids show as well, which is bonkers.
But he jumped on. He jumped on, and
it's nice.
Fantastic, really, really great. Last year, in the same week that we were there, we watched the Newcomer of the Year Norman Award show in 2022, which was hosted by Barry Ferns, who has been on this podcast, and featured a number of new acts, including the winner, Matt Rouse. What are your views on comedy competitions in general? Do you think they're a good thing for comics?
Yeah, for me, yes. It's a bit of a mixed bag. You hear people saying they don't want to do competitions, and I always ask them people why, because I want to know what their reasons are so I can make the competition that we put on the best. I think some of the feedback is that some competitions are, solely audience only, which means it opens up to, who can bring the most friends down to an event. So it's difficult. I think it's always good for young acts to do competitions, personally, for me. But we just try to make ours as fun as possible and have a really good lineup. And obviously, we open ours up to have, a real kind of newcomer mix to that, and that's from people that have done 10 gigs to acts that have done 80 to 100, etc. But yeah, it's I think they're a good thing. I've done a few competitions, and the only criticisms I've had of some competitions is that you'd do a set, 2 or 3 or 4 breaks, and at the end the compare would be like, oh, 1 was Steve, 2 was Susan, 3 was Matt, and you're like, they don't know who we are. So then everyone was wandering around going, so what number was 4? And no, I was 3. You were 3. So who was 2? And I'm like, I know that, that needs to be tightened up a little bit. Otherwise, people just remember the last 2, because they don't really remember anyone's name. So yeah.
I'm with you. I think they're a good thing for up and coming, emerging comedians. There's nothing wrong with a bit of competition, and also it's an opportunity for the newcomers that we book every year to perform to an audience in Hastings as well. And what we offer the winner a chance to bring their full show back the following year. Barry MCs it and hosts, and he's excellent at what he does. So I think it's okay. I think as long as it's managed okay, they're a good thing.
Yeah.
But mainly for like emerging acts, for people that are quite new to performing.
I totally agree. The one that we saw last year, I've seen about 2 or 3 of the acts since, and they're obviously gaining momentum as they go along. There was about a couple of weeks ago, I went to do a pub quiz, my local pub in Wimbledon where I live, and this girl came up and she said, "Oh, thank you so much for featuring me in your blog." And I didn't realise she was a stand-up comedian. So I said, "Oh, we'll have to get a photo and everything." So we did, and it was wonderful. And she said, "Yeah," she said, I do a lot of competitions, and you saw me there. So it does work, obviously. And I think it does help a comedian's career.
Yeah. Go on, Jake.
No, go on, Chris.
we've that's why we started the Newcomer of the Year, or the Norman Award. We've had some acts. I remember the first year we had it in the Albion, Jake, and we had a really good lineup. It was like early doors, Kelly Convey, Russell Arafon, and when Russell won it that year, we said to Russell, you got to come back and bring a show. And he was like, "Oh, I've not written a show." And by the next year, he came back with a show, and it was a fantastic show. We've had, Michael Odewale. There's been, Jenny Hart. We really opened it up to acts at the time that, especially early on, that weren't kind of, hadn't written a show yet or weren't gigging that much.
Yeah.
Now we see them and we're like, yeah, okay, that's it's good to see.
Yeah, it's good to see. Yeah, definitely. There's comedians now that are very verified on the comedy circuit. They're doing well in their social medias. They're hilarious, and the first time we saw them was at our Newcomer a few years ago, and there's loads of examples of comics like that have come through like that. So I'm quite proud of our competition, actually. We've done it every year.
Brilliant.
Since 2016. It's cool. It's good for it to be a part of. There's lots of regulars that come back each year that like it as well in the audience. So yeah, I think we'll carry on doing it, won't we, Chris?
Although I forgot the helmet this year, I was quite annoyed at myself. We had this handmade Norman helmet with a chainmail. Whenever someone wins it, they put it on. They get a little prize, and they get to have the Norman Award helmet, which I think Michael Odewale was the last person we had put that on. We wasn't sure. It's quite heavy, but it makes the competition distinctive, because if you see someone wearing the helmet, our anticipation is that people go, "Oh, you won the Norman Award," and what is a Norman Award? Nothing and everything. We don't know, but it's fun. Fundamentally, it's fun, and that's and the show this year I thought was actually one of the strongest newcomers lineups that we'd seen. It was so strong, and that felt like it was really healthy for comedy after 2 years of outage.
Very much so. I totally agree. Yeah, very much so. Tell me more about life away from the Hastings Comedy Festival. For example, are you both stand-up comedians with stand-up careers? I know you're a stand-up, Jake. Jake, I know you're a stand-up. Chris, are you a stand-up, Jake?
I'm not.
You're not?
No, I'm not.
So what do you do for work other than the...
Yeah, I've got a career in health and social care.
Wow.
Yeah, so since my mid-20s, similar to Chris, to be honest, me and Chris actually met at work in a residential home in 2012.
Right.
So that's, and I think because of that, we knew, especially when it comes to organising a comedy festival, we knew that we could work together. So, I mean, it wasn't like two friends that grew up and had this idea. We actually met at work, knew we could work together, and that helped with the development. But I've got career. So worked in housing, worked with rough sleepers, people with complex needs, drug and alcohol treatment, which is what I'm currently doing. Yeah, so I've got quite a career that I'm proud of outside of organising this. Also on the board of trustees for Hastings Furniture Service, which is a really cool charity in Hastings. I'm a parent as well. I've got a 15-year-old son. He's 16 next month. He loves comedy as well. This year we've actually started to go to gigs together, which is good.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, so it's nice, and the comedy festival is like a nice addition and a good balance as well compared to our day jobs. Which is, we love, extremely rewarding, but it comes with its challenges. I mean, you mentioned that your job as well, Rich, so some similarities, I suppose.
Very much so. I look after special education need kids, school travel.
There you go.
And that's very rewarding as well, and absolutely love it. And I had 11 years working on a reception in a school, and before that was in the civil service. So it's all admin-y sort of place. And the comedy is such a massive bonus because it's such a joyous thing, to have a hobby and a passion for.
But the amount of times that people ask me if I'm a comedian, honestly, it's a lot. It's a lot.
You're very funny.
I do enjoy writing and public speaking when I get the opportunity, I suppose.
Yeah.
But I've never got up and told a joke.
However, Chris, you have.
I started. I've been writing comedy my whole life. It wasn't until I was 24, 25 when I first got on stage, and then I kind of did it the other way around. I kind of written an hour show and took that to a load of festivals before I nailed down a solid 15 minutes and toured with that. Because I'm down on the southeast coast by the sea, for me to travel up, it's 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 hours for me to get, London, past London and up that. So I'd, the festival was a really good opportunity for me also to bring comedy closer to me as well and to the town.
Well, it's great that you're standing up and carving a career out of it as well.
Yeah, I also, so like similar to Jake, I work full time in mental health services. Currently at the local authority, but moving on to different things. But comedy is always, it's kind of like trying to have a healthy balance between, for me, I'd love nothing more than to be out on the road eating Gigsters pasties up the M1 and performing coming back. But whenever I come back, the A21's always shut. So it's like I can leave, but I can never come back. So it's like,
I infamously once had a go at stand-up comedy myself. I wanted to get it off my chest. I've told many a comedian this story. I used to know a promoter, and he said, he said, we've got a gong show for old people. Have you got a set? And I'd written a 3-minute thing which he liked, and he said, well, go on then, and you've got 3 minutes, and I might gong you up. So I walked out, and the first thing I said was, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. People think I look like Eddie the Eagle Edwards, the ski jumper, but I can't see the resemblance myself. And of course, I'm his double. And there's 3 people. There's 3 people in the crowd, 3 old blokes, and one old bloke at the back just went, "Fuck off!" And that was my comedy career. And as I walked off, I said to the promoter, I said, never say never again, but I think my vocation is sitting in the audience support.
I know, that's the same with me. I think, if I ever was to write a show, it'd have to be something about so specific that happened in my life. But I prefer being behind the scenes. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think if you ever get a chance to see Chris's show, watch it. It's really great.
Oh, well,
big
that
fan
20
of what he
minutes
does.
last year was brilliant. Really good. Very quick as well. Very good with an audience.
Yeah, good impressions, really relatable, especially to working class people, which is
Yeah.
our upbringing.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's good.
Cheers,
Really
mate,
good stuff.
for the plug. Appreciate it.
Definitely. I'll come and see you in Hastings next year. Who are your favorite comedians, past and present?
I mean, I've always been a fan of comedy. I mean, most people are, but I remember a very, very young age, kind of going in the 80s. I was born in 83. You know, watching Monty Python with my dad, Only Fools and Horses.
Yeah.
I remember watching Eddie Murphy, actually, Delirious, when I was quite young and being blown away, and some Richard Pryor. And then into the 90s, you know, the stuff that was on TV, like Harry Enfield, Fast Show,
Brilliant.
Big Train, Spaced, all that sitcoms that were kind of coming out in the 90s. I'm a sucker for Alan Partridge, to be honest, as well. But, you know, I suppose like comedians that we actually book, you know, Tony Law, I'm a big fan of. And I remember getting the opportunity to book him. I said to Chris, we've got to try and get Tony Law. I love him. And we do. Yeah. We book him every year. Yeah. There's so many good comedians that we book each year that I just leave thinking that was brilliant. And there's so many to name, really.
And that's the magic of it. That's the magic of it. When you go and you sit down and you think, this is fantastic. I'm having the best time ever, and it's of the moment. It's just the best thing.
Yeah.
I remember. I remember growing up and watching comedy on the telly as a kid, and it was always, you know, a bit unconventional. There was always Roy Tubby Brown on the background, a bit of Jim Davidson, and there was always kind of comedy video DVDs flying around. Lee Evans for me growing up was just an absolute. I remember being like 10 or 11 years old and being like, Lee Evans for me is the funniest, you know what I mean, the funniest man alive.
Probably the best visual comedian ever. I would think.
And his shows are long as well. I've rewatched some recently with my son. It's like, it's like a 2-hour show, and then he ends with a singing on, like playing a piano.
I saw him in Brighton, and I just thought, and it was the Monsters tour just before he kind of quit doing comedy. But the show that stood out for me, that actually got me properly writing a show, was when I watched Russell Kane's Smoke Screens and Castles. That for me was kind of fundamental to like me wanting to structure a show that told a story. And that's when I wrote Cereal for Dinner. And I was like, for me, it was Kane. But I remember when I first saw Russell Hicks, and for me, when I first saw Russell Hicks, I was like, that for me was, and it was I think it might have been in Brighton, and there was a real kind of, must have been about 15 people in the audience, a real kind of, you know, last minute thing. He came down and did his thing, and I literally laughed for about 90 minutes solid all the way through, and I was just crying, and I was like, that is a specialty with him. And so that's
a very good talent. There's no doubt.
Exceptional. But we love every time we put the festival on, we always find a kind of brand new favourite, whether it's like John Robertson's Dark Room, or whether it's, you know, I think
there's loads of good female comedians as well that we really love.
Feature,
like Maisie Adam, Helen Bauer, Tanya Moore, you know, so
Olga.
That's brilliant, you know, and you can watch them every time. It's just, Mickey Overman's great as well. So we've got that, you know, that kind of core group of acts as well that we love. I mean, there's so much out there, isn't there? And I think as a, you know, Britain, we're very lucky to have kind of like the level of comedy and comedians and writers and actors in comedy that we have.
Very much, you know,
so. We're spoiled for choice, aren't we, really?
Yeah, very, very much so. That's why the blog exists. I've seen so many. My first ever show with my mum and dad and my brother was in Scarborough in 1974, and it was Les Dawson, and then who was just incredible. He's in my top 5. And a year later, we saw Tommy Cooper, and he was extraordinary. And I just got the bug for it, and I just love going. The whole process of going, sitting down, the group of comedians who made me laugh, just amazing. The first time I went to the Comedy Store in the 1980s, it was Linda Smith, Phil Jupitus, Richard Morton, and the headliner was a chap called Charles Fleischer, who nobody ever heard of again, an American visual comedian who went on to voice Roger Rabbit. He was never seen again.
Right. Well, actually, Chris can do a pretty good Roger Rabbit impression.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of my top 5 impressions is Roger Rabbit.
I'm definitely coming to see the show for the impressions.
It's really good. It's really good.
But it is. It's just fantastic. When you get chance, like me, do you go to comedy as members of the audience?
Yeah. We actually went to see Tim Key a couple of weeks ago up in London.
What an act!
Yeah. Again, took my son. I mean, me and Chris, we try to. I mean, I would probably like to go to more, but we definitely go up. We go up to the Bill Murray, don't we? Every now and then. Saw Kevin Bridges early on in the year. Leicester, we go to every year, don't we? Hull,
Backyard.
So Brighton.
Yeah, and locally as well. We try to pop over and to Brighton and events that are happening in Hastings. When we first started doing the comedy scene in Hastings, it wasn't great.
Right.
Outside of the theatre, we've got White Rock Theatre, which is great. I mean, Frankie Boyle's booked to be there on his tour next year, which is going to be good.
Jimmy Carr as well.
Yeah, outside of the theatre, it was few and far between, wasn't it?
Yeah. So it's always good to see when there's comedy nights going on. Was it Paul Foot was in town the other day? And so it's we're always kind of like happy to see the kind of progression of.
Well, I might see you in Leicester, might see you in London. You never know, but I will definitely see you in Hastings. If I was to set up a comedy fringe festival, what advice would you both give me?
I would probably say listen to this podcast.
Yes. Good answer.
What advice would we give you? I mean, it's having a really good relationship to the venue that you're in, from the ground up. Having a really good relationship with the acts that you're putting in there. Getting the branding right, getting your budget right. Making sure you're investing a good amount of time in making sure that it works, so that it continues to work rather than just a kind of one-hit pony. Give it some longevity.
I'd also say be realistic with what you can achieve, because you'll overwhelm yourself and you'll set yourself actions and tasks that you just won't be able to complete. I think you've got to have a good team around you. I mean, me and Chris are very fortunate to work really well together. I wouldn't probably suggest doing it by yourself as well. And I know some people do event planning by themselves, but that must be very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Just having a good relationship, maintaining that relationship with the community as well, whether it's the local community in Hastings and St Leonard's or the comedy industry, so it's about maintaining it, really.
Yeah, sustaining it, keeping it going. Yeah.
Selecting venues that work for comedy. So, whenever we're selecting a venue that's part of the festival, we're like, okay, would we or would I perform there? And if the answer is yes, then it might go into the pot of being a venue. Otherwise, it sometimes it doesn't work, because we have to make sure that, if an act's coming down to the festival, they're in a venue that works for comedy. And I think that's fair to everyone then, including the venue. So we're not kind of misleading and saying, yeah, we can put comedy in the side of this room, we'll put a PA system up there, and it's like put a banner up on a stage, and they're like, oh, okay then. And it doesn't always work like that. So we have to make sure the venues are just good for purpose.
I find it amazing that if there is a pub with a rum in it, there is normally a comedy night in it. Somebody has organised a comedy night in it. And that is so healthy for the comedy industry. But I wouldn't have a clue about how to go about it. So thank you very much for doing it so well.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you for coming. And yeah, it's been nice seeing you at shows, Rich. It really has.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I'm definitely coming to the 2023 one. I might even, with my new job, hopefully get the whole week off and come for the entire thing for the first time.
There you go. It's Wednesday, June the 14th to Sunday, June the 18th.
Brilliant. Well,
Rich, we've got a proposal surprise for you, Rich. We'd like you to be a guest judge next year at the Newcomer of the Year competition.
Oh, that would be amazing. I would be absolutely delighted. That would be fantastic. Thank you so much.
No, that's not a problem. We thought actually if there's an individual that knows comedy, you know, from the inside out, it's yourself, and it'll be our pleasure to have you down and do that with us. So, well,
that's so kind of you. Thank you so much. I'd be delighted. Just before we go, and I could talk to you both all night. This has been wonderful. You've been fantastic guests. Is there anything else you'd like to say? Anything you'd like to promote apart from the comedy festival? Anything at all?
I guess if this is going out next June, I guess we'll see you in a few weeks. If you want to come down and come down and see, you know, probably one of the best kept secrets in live comedy and down on the seafront. And the fish and chips are good, the comedy's good, the weather's usually good.
It is, they are.
Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I think we've got a Twitter account at Hastings Comedy Festival.
At Hastings Comedy Festival, yeah.
Well, thank you so much, as I say, and I, for one, cannot wait for the 2023 Hastings Comedy Festival. I will be there, my friends. All the very best to you, and thank you so much for talking to me.